Excellent!
What's up, guys? Welcome back to Paul's Hardware and my monthly builds video for May 2017. I do this every month. At the beginning of the month, I part out a couple builds, so we're going to go over the parts list today. Then later in the month, I actually build the system, and then towards the end of the month and sometimes creeping into the beginning of the next month, I actually test the system, come back at you guys with some benchmarks and noise testing and all that good stuff. Speaking of which, just last month, or just a couple weeks ago actually, I did my build for last month, which was April. It is a $1,000 Ryzen build. It's right here in my builds playlist. If you guys want to actually see some builds being put together today, check that out. And I will have the follow-up video for that, the testing one, up in the next day or two. I am done with the testing and the video is just being edited. Of course, I'd love to hear you guys' feedback for next month. Last month I asked what you guys wanted to see for May. The overwhelming consensus was to do a build at the cheapest price point amongst all of the ones that I listed, $400. So that is what I'm going to be doing today. And then, of course, if you guys want to build, or if you want to vote on next month, check the description for the straw poll link to what PC builds do you want to see in June. Some Ryzen options, maybe a super budget build, or maybe a home theater ultimate PC, or maybe this Intel one in the middle. Who knows? Let's get right into it with today's builds, though. I'm going to start off with that $400 build as promised. And here's sort of a unique situation. Like AMD, right? The big talk for the past couple months has been AMD since they launched Ryzen 7 and Ryzen 5. They haven't launched Ryzen 3 yet. It's supposed to come in the second half of 2017. So Intel still has some pretty good options down in the super budget range that AMD doesn't have very good answers for. AMD does have some very inexpensive APUs and stuff like that that are down there, but they're all using the older architecture, so they really, it's hard for me to recommend them now that Zen is available. So here's my system. It's going to cost you $420. What? Starting off with the first build, though, this is the $400 build we're kicking it off with. I had a weird moment just a moment ago, which was when I pulled up this build for the first time, and I spend a decent amount of time prior to doing this video making sure all the parts line up and they're compatible and the price. And I got the price down to about $390 for this one. I was very proud, but then I pulled the actual PC part picker list up, and it said $420, and I realized it was because of a change in price with the SSD. But all that said, let's go down each part one at a time. Got the G4560 dual-core Intel Pentium processor. It's a Kaby Lake-based processor, a B250 motherboard, and then all the rest of the parts as shown right there. Of course, links to all these parts lists and everything, as well as individual parts, is down in the description. The G4560 is just an incredible bang for the buck when it comes to Intel's super budget options. It's only $60. It is, again, just a dual core, but it does have a 3.5 gigahertz frequency out of the box, so even though you can't overclock it, it's going to go at a pretty good speed right away. And then, of course, it's got the Kaby Lake architecture, so it's an excellent starter chip for those of you who are on a budget. For the motherboard, we have a B250 motherboard, so the B250 chipset came out right along the same time as Kaby Lake launched. It is, again, a more budget chipset, but it's going to get the job done. The motherboard I chose was this one from Gigabyte, the DS3H, and I made a few considerations here. One was, of course, the price, and this is only about $90. And then I also wanted to make sure that you had 4 DIMM slots for memory to make sure that you can expand your memory in the future if you wanted to. And then also an M.2 slot, which you can see it's actually just right above, it's right here, just above the PCIe slot, which is a good spot for it. It means you can access it without removing your graphics card. It also means the graphics card is going to be trapping heat just a little bit less in there. This board does lack a USB Type-C port on the back, so that was not as good to have. And also bear in mind, it's only got 2 fan headers, CPU fan header, and then there's a system fan header up in the top left. So if you are going to be using multiple fans in your case, you're going to want to get a fan splitter. Actually, I definitely should add a fan splitter to this. Maybe I can update the part picker list with that, because the case I chose does have 2 fans. For memory, we've got the Crucial Ballistix Sport LT 8GB variants. These, I didn't really care about what these looked like. I just wanted an 8GB kits. DDR4 2400 is a little bit faster than 2133, and you can get these for about $60 at Newegg. They're pretty low profile, so they get the job done. Coming around to storage, and here's where I had a quandary, because I always like to recommend getting SSDs with your builds. So a 240 or 256 gig SSD was a little bit too expensive for this one to fit in. So I went with the 120 to 128 gig range, and I just added via the parametric filter option on PC Part Picker. So if you look at the list here, you'll see parametric filter, and then right now it's choosing the SK Hynix 120 gig for about $50. But you should definitely take a look at the SSDs that are down in this range. Double check where you're buying them from. Make sure it's going to be shipped to you quickly, for example. Like there's a Zotac one in the 240 gig range. It's a very good price on Amazon, but it takes 4 to 6 weeks to ship or something stupid like that. So just sort them by price, go with the lowest price options, and then you can actually see the price that jumped up on. I had the OCZ Tryon 150 in here, but it jumped from $50 to $80 during the time between when I set this parts list up this morning and when I started filming. Now, if you don't have a hard drive to add along with your SSD, like if you're getting a 120 gig SSD, you're going to be able to fit Windows on it, maybe a few programs. You'll want more storage beyond that. I usually say if you have an old hard drive lying around, repurpose it, take it, format it, put it in your new system, and you'll be good to go. If you don't have that though, then instead of the SSD, I would say just get like a 2 terabyte drive, and there's plenty of those on Amazon that you can get in the $40 to $50 range. That'll give you a lot more storage and it'll be a lot more usable, but it's not going to be nearly as fast or responsive as an SSD, so I definitely recommend doing the SSD if you can. For a graphics card, I have the Radeon RX 460. This is a version by Gigabyte. It's the WindForce edition. I've checked out this card personally. Stays nice and cool. Very low power, and it's only about $100. I did opt for the 4 gig variant. You can find 2 gig variants for cheaper, but I like to have the 4 gig options so you can make sure you can handle all your 1080 games, even if you're playing higher end ones. For a case, I went super budget because the case doesn't matter. The case doesn't affect performance. This is definitely not the greatest case though. It's a Rosewood case and it's going to get the job done. It's micro ATX. It's got a little bit of ventilation, and then there's actually some pictures over on Newegg that will show you this case actually does come with a couple fans, and that was one of my requirements as well. It's got a 120 intake. It's got what looks to be an 80 outtake or exhaust, and of course space for your basic needs in there as far as getting the job done. And you can get it for about $20 if you buy it on Amazon. Why is it more expensive on Newegg? Isn't Rosewood the Newegg house brand? I don't know. I have no explanation for that. Finally, you're going to need a power supply, and the EVGA Bronze series of power supplies is still the best bang for your buck. Again, your cables aren't going to look pretty. It's only 450 watts, so if you want to go for the high-end graphics card or something, honestly, you shouldn't go with the high-end graphics card with this system anyway. This will get the job done. Pretty quiet fan on that too, which is pretty nice. And those are my parts recommendations for a $400 gaming build. It'll get you up and running, get you off the ground. 460 is a nice card. Keep your eye out for the 560. AMD Radeon just launched the 570 and 580. They should have a 560 that's coming as well. And if the 560 is available, then I would opt for that over the 460, unless the 460 is a great bargain. If it's 20 or 30 bucks cheaper than a 560, then I would go with the 460. All right, let's move on to my next build. I actually have 2 variants of this build, and this is probably going to be the one that I build this month. I might do the budget one as well, but I've been meaning to upgrade and replace my streaming and capture system. Actually, the system I'm using to capture this video right now. So I want to do this right here, the ultimate godly streaming and capture system. All the parts are listed right here. I have 2 variants of this system because I did it in Intel trim, which is probably what I'm going to buy because I have or I'm not going to buy, but I'm going to build because I have the parts. It's $5,300-ish though. And then I also have an AMD variant of this, the AMD edition, since there is the 1800X now, which would be a great option for an 8-core, 16-thread streaming and gaming processor. That's only $465 as compared to the 6950X, which I'm using, which is in the $1,600 to $1,700 range. The motherboard is also, well, roughly the same price, but you do save a decent amount of money there, and this one comes in at just over $4,000. Wait, you can't see that. Just over $4,000 for this build here. However, I will point out that with a system like this where I'm adding a lot of peripherals, I'm using a lot of the PCI Express bandwidth, some of the potential incompatibility issues down here at the bottom might come into play, like the M.2 slots on this board, which is the highest end currently available X370 board, the X-Power Gaming Titanium. Shares some bandwidth between the M.2 slot and SATA ports, so I might not be able to connect up everything that I want to connect, which includes a couple capture cards. So that is a serious consideration if you're looking for a really high-end Ryzen build. Intel chips do still have the advantage when it comes to PCIe lanes. They have up to 40, which is more than you get with Ryzen, which is, I believe, 28. So the CPU is the ridiculous 6950X. So I actually have this CPU, which is why I'm doing a parted out system build with the 6950X. I would never recommend anyone, unless you just have money falling out your butt, to actually buy this because it's ridiculously overpriced, but it is 10 core, 20 threads, 40 PCIe lanes, unlocked for overclocking, and like I said, I have one. It's in the test bed that's over there in the corner, but since all the tests I've been doing recently have been on Kaby Lake and Ryzen, I haven't really been getting that much use out of it, and I feel like swapping it over into this system would be a much better way to actually make use of it. Beyond that, I stuck with air cooling and pretty high-end but reliable parts across the board. So for an air cooler, I have the NHD15. I also do have one of these on hand, so I can add that in, although I do need to contact Noctua to get the LGA 2011-3 bracket for it. Noctua is really good at that. Massive air cooler. Fans are ugly and hideous, but it's going to be in a case without a side panel window, so I am okay with it. It's about 85 bucks, but it rivals a lot of the liquid coolers that are out there, and I wanted air cooling as opposed to liquid cooling because it's going to be a production machine. Motherboard is the Asus X99 Deluxe 2, another part that I actually have on hand. And the nice thing about having this on hand was I was able to check something very specific for it, which is the connectivity options and how everything is reconfigured depending on the CPU you have and depending on what you have connected in via PCI Express. Because I'm going to have a graphics card up here, I'm going to have add-on cards in here, I'm going to be using both U.2 ports, I'm going to be using the M.2, and every time you add something over here for like M.2 and U.2, it might reduce some of the bandwidth that's available via the PCIe slots over here. So since I need by 4 PCIe Gen 3 connections or at least PCIe Gen 2 connections for my 2 capture cards, I might add a 3rd capture card as well, and then I've got 2 U.2 drives and the M.2. I had to make sure that everything was actually going to fit in here. And if I'm using a 40-lane chip, actually I can. This is about a $400 motherboard, so it is fairly high-end, but Asus has been, Asus is known for their high-end motherboards, I guess. For memory, I just have a Corsair Vengeance LPX kit. I wanted 64 gigs, and I wanted it reasonably priced, relatively. This is the most reasonably priced 4x16 gig kit that's out there, and it's even not terribly slow. DDR4 3000, the Vengeance kit does a good job because its low profile looks okay. I'm going to be using 2 Intel 750 series 400 gig NVMe SSDs. I was either going to do 2 of those or I was going to do 2 of the 960 Pro, but since the motherboard I'm using only has 1 M.2 slot, I would have had to use one of these with the riser card, so I just decided, you know what, I'm going to go with 2 of the 750 series to make use of those 2 native U.2 ports. And then for the M.2, I will have a single Samsung 960 Pro 512 gig, and that will have my operating system on it. The 2 750 series SSDs will give me an 800 gig RAID 0 array that should hopefully be really fast and be able to capture stuff like high-end 4K footage that's being captured at a really high bit rates with max color depth and all that kind of stuff. Beyond that, for long-term storage, I'm going to drop in a couple WD 4TB black drives, probably in RAID 1, so that when I'm copying and saving footage, they'll be immediately have some redundant storage built into it. Not a backup, mind you, but redundancy. And then for the graphics card, I again did the parametric filter just to find the cheapest GTX 1080 Ti that's available. A Titan X p would also be an option here, but those are almost twice the price. So I just stuck with the 1080 Ti, which should get the job done, and since I'm wanting to potentially be able to game on the system while I'm streaming at the same time or capturing externally or something like that, I think having a high-end graphics card will be a good option. For case, we have the Be Quiet Dark Base 900. It's the all-black version because I didn't have much call for a black and orange theme or anything like that. I am going with the version with the solid side panel, not the tempered glass, because I've been using the Silent Base 800 for my streaming system for the past couple years, and it stayed very quiet, and I'd rather have the solid side panel for more acoustic dampening than I would a tempered glass because I'm not going to be looking at the system all that often. It is slightly larger, but it's like super modular and it all comes apart, and this was in no small part due to the fact that Dimitri and over at Hardware Connects, in his reviews of the best cases of 2016, gave this his best case award, so I want to try it out. I think it's going to be a good option for that. For power supply, we've got the EVGA Supernova G2, 850 watt, 80 plus gold, all black cables. There's a G3 version of this available now too as well, but get whichever one is priced better. And then of course I need a couple capture cards, at least a couple capture cards. So I did a video on this card. This is the Blackmagic DeckLink Mini Recorder 4K. Captures in 4K, HDMI 2.0 capable. Can even do higher bitrate and higher color depth variations. Although I do need to test this out and see if the software has come along a little bit further. This is for an input, so it can capture an external device, whether it's a gaming system that's being captured or like a camera that I'm capturing with. And then I'm also going to drop in the mini monitor 4K, so this gives me an output. So if I want to take a separate system and pass it through, still play at 4K on a different monitor, but capture it directly to this system, I can output via this one. Blackmagic also has options where it's got the input and the output on the same card, but I wanted to give this one a try with the full thing going on, and then I might also drop in another capture card in there, but that remains to be seen in the future. I've also got external capture cards that I'm running, so I've got like the Razer Ripsaw. So the idea is that with a few internal capture devices and possibly some additional external devices, I could have 2, 3, or 4 cameras, or like a couple cameras and 1 or 2 systems all connected to the system and all streaming at the same time. And I just want to play around with it and see what it can do, see what it's capable of, and hopefully it will be a very nice build. And I also have a lot more storage, because that's the other thing, is I'm kind of running out of storage on my main streaming system over here. But guys, that's all for this video. I hope you've enjoyed it. Of course, links to all these builds and the parts and everything are down in the comments below. I also just realized that I misspelled ultimate. Ultimate. I don't think I can correct that either, but oh well. At least I caught it. Hit the thumbs up button though if you enjoyed this video. I'll be back very soon to build one of these systems. I'll be back with the Ryzen 5 testing video later this weekend. Thanks again for watching, and we'll see you next time.